Welcome to another enlightening episode of The Truth About the Plant, the show that takes you on a journey through the world of psychoactive plants and alternative wellness, all while delivering real, actionable insights that you crave. I'm your host, Christina Dees. My equally talented co host, Dr. Amanda Ryman. You get to tell them why we're here.
Absolutely. So we are here because it can be so difficult to find good, science backed, truthful information about cannabis on the internet. You might go into Google, you might put some search terms in there, and you're going to get 100 different responses. Many of them will actually contradict themselves. You can ask all your friends, you're going to get an equally number of varied responses. So, we're here to give you science backed, actionable insights related to cannabis so you can get the truth and get on your way, go about your day. Think of us as your kick-ass granddaughters or your really cool aunties, because we will always tell you the truth.
That's right. But whether you're a seasoned cultivator or a curious newcomer, join us in this episode as we delve into the art and science of nurturing your very own cannabis garden. From germinating seeds to mastering the harvest process, we're here to help you cultivate green thumbs and even greener harvest. So grab your gardening gloves and let's sow the needs. Let's sow the seeds of knowledge together. So, Dr. Ryman, how do I grow my own marijuana?
Well, cannabis is really fun to grow. And no pun intended, it grows like a weed. So even if you have a so called black thumb and not a green one, cannabis is a plant that even you can grow at home.
Well, so spring's in the air. It's the perfect time to plant a garden. I've already started, and in some states that includes cannabis, not in North Carolina where I live, so I didn't plant any of that. So today we're going to give everyone some basic tips for planting cannabis outdoors.
Yep, absolutely. So, the first step, as you mentioned, is that cannabis is not legal to grow everywhere. So, step one in your cannabis cultivation experience is find out what's allowed. So, in most legal states, you can grow your own, but that is not true for everywhere. New Jersey, sorry, New Jersey folks, which pains me because I was born in New Jersey. But even though New Jersey has legal cannabis, you are not allowed to cultivate there. In the state of Washington, you can cultivate cannabis, but only if you're a medical cannabis patient, not if you're an adult use consumer. And so the amount you can grow can also vary from state to state and has a lot to do with whether or not you're a medical cannabis patient. So in the state of California, for example, all adults can grow up to 4 plants per household. But if you have a medical card, then you can grow as many plants as you need to help with your condition in 100 square feet of grow space. Actually, California is 6 plants. Sorry, I said 4 plants. 6 plants per household or 100 square feet if you're a patient. Now, cities and counties can pass their own rules around cultivation. So some won't let you cultivate outdoors. Some have rules about having a fence or a locked area where your cannabis is. So before you start, the first step is to figure out what is allowed in the place where you live.
Okay, so let's say I am in a city and state that allows me to grow some plants outdoors. How do I get started?
Well, the first thing you want to decide is whether you want to grow from seed or clone. And they both have their advantages and disadvantages. So, for example, clones, they're really great for new cultivators, especially because a clone is basically a carbon copy of a mother plant. So they take a cutting, they root it, and then they sell it as a clone. So there's a couple of advantages here. One is that you know it's going to be female. So only the female plant produces cannabis flowers. So if you have a clone that came from a female plant, you know that that clone is going to be female. Another advantage of a clone is that the seedling stage, when the cannabis plant is very, very small, is a time of great vulnerability. And I will tell you, when I first started growing cannabis 30 years ago, I killed so many plants when they were very, very small. I could not get that plant to grow more than a few inches until I was gifted a larger plant. And then it was a lot easier. So if you're newer to cannabis, a clone can be a really easy way to get started. And most dispensaries will sell clones, especially this time of year. Now, there are also some advantages to seeds. More experienced growers say that seeds are a bit more robust, that the plants grow a little bit bigger. And one of the other advantages for seeds is that you can actually order them online. So it was ruled that seeds are not a cannabis product because they do not actually contain THC. So you can get seeds online. There's a lot of people that sell them, but make sure you get them from a reputable source. Now, a disadvantage of seeds is that it could be a male. So unless you're planning on breeding, in which you need one male and one female plant, you might have some males in your seed stock and they are not going to produce any flowers. So the first step is figuring out, do you want to grow from seed or do you want to grow from clone?
Okay, so let's say I want to use seeds. Can I just throw them in some dirt and add some water?
Well, you can, but there's a technique called germination that's going to increase the likelihood of these plants being successful. So, germinating a seed basically means helping the root break through from that hard shell before you plant it in the dirt. So, here is a really super easy technique for germinating seeds. So, you're going to take a plate, you're going to take a very wet paper towel and put it on that plate. You're going to lay your seeds out so there's some space in between each seed. You're going to take another really wet paper towel and lay it on top of your seeds. And then you're going to wrap the whole thing in saran wrap, plastic wrap, so that it doesn't let any air through. And then you're going to put it in a dark place away from direct sunlight. Now, every day or so, you're going to lift up that plastic. You're going to spray that paper towel down with a spray bottle. And within 2 to 4 days, you'll start to see a little root emerge from the edge of the seed. And once that little root emerges, then that seed is ready for planting. A lot of times they won't all emerge at once. Some may take longer than others, but watch it carefully because you can go one day, there's no roots. And then if you let it go a couple days and look, you have really long roots that have stuck to the paper towel. So it's important to check it maybe twice a day. And then as soon as that little root appears, it's ready to put in the soil.
Okay, so let's say my root has sprouted, and even if I'm using a clone or, I'm still at that rooted stage, what is the next step?
Well, something about cannabis is that it will grow as big as you let it. Meaning that if you plant it in the ground and it's got lots of space for those roots to spread out, it doesn't have a lot of plants next to it, it can grow really big. I mean, I live in the Emerald Triangle. I have seen some really big outdoor cannabis plants. If you're newer to cultivation or if you live in a neighborhood, I do not recommend you let your cannabis plants get that big. For one, the bigger it gets, the more work you have to do trimming all the buds and storing all the buds afterwards, which is quite a bit of work. Secondly, you may not want your neighbors to know what you're doing. That might leave your plants open to theft once they start flowering. So I'm a big fan of container planting. And this container can be any size. It can be a smaller container. It can be a really big smart pot that's several gallons worth of soil. Again, cannabis will get as big as you let it. Now, if you're a newer consumer, the easiest, peasiest way to grow some cannabis is to get a clone and stick it in just a medium-sized pot. That's going to give you a nice little tabletop cannabis plant, put it in full sun, and it's going to be really, really manageable for your first time. So if you are planting in a container, you want to make sure that you get really good organic soil from the garden store. And if you're planting in the ground, you're going to want to test your pH level before you plant. So a good pH level for cannabis is between 6 and 7. So if your pH level is lower than that, then you're going to want to add some things like lime or calcium carbonate to bring that up. If your pH level is too high, then you're going to want to add sulfur or phosphoric acid to bring that down. And all of these things are available at your local garden store.
All right, so I've got my seeds and my clones in the soil. How much do I need to water? How often should I be watering it? And should I be using any nutrients like plant food?
So that's a great question. So one thing we like to say about cannabis is that it does not like to get its feet wet, meaning that cannabis does not like to sit in water. So you may be at a higher risk of overwatering than underwatering. But how frequently you water is really going to depend on your climate. So where I live, we have days that regularly get above 95 degrees. We may have days where it's over 100 for a few days in a row. And during that time, I need to water my cannabis every single day. If you live in a more temperate climate with lower temperatures, then you may need to water just a few times a week. But the cannabis will really tell you. Sometimes I wait until I notice the leaves have started drooping a little, and then I water, and that really just perks it right back up. So you'll kind of get to know your plants along with your climate in terms of what they like and when they look their best. So, in terms of nutrients, cannabis has two parts to its growing cycle. It has a vegetative phase and it has a flowering phase. And the type of nutrients you want to give it are going to vary depending on the phase that it's in. So when you go to the garden store and you look at plant nutrients, you might see a little sign on there that says NPK ratio. And then it'll tell you like 2:1:2 or 1:2:2, and it'll give you a little ratio. The N, the P, and the K, if we go back to our high school chemistry class, stands for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So those are the three main macronutrients that cannabis needs. Now, when it's in its vegetative state, and that's when it's growing still, right? So when you put it in the ground, it's growing bigger, 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 bigger. It hasn't started flowering yet. You want to emphasize the nitrogen. Nitrogen helps with plant growth. So you're going to find nutrients that are higher in nitrogen compared to the phosphorus and potassium. Once your plant starts to flower and you start to see those buds appear, then you're going to want to dial down the nitrogen and you're going to want to up the potassium, because during the flowering phase, the potassium is what's going to feed those buds and make those buds really big and beautiful.
Wow, that is a lot of information. And I guess we should wait and talk about harvesting because harvest season is usually in the fall. So
Yes.
people are thinking about planting a garden, they can start here and check back in a few months because then we're going to harvest together.
Absolutely. So I mentioned those two phases of growth. They're really tied to the sunlight. So once the sunlight starts to diminish and we start to see those longer nights, that's going to trigger the cannabis to start blooming. So if you plant your cannabis in late May or early June, you are going to have a harvest that's around October, depending on the kind of cannabis that you plant. And you're going to start to see that flowering happen probably more in August. So you'll have a few months of vegetative when it's growing big. You're going to have a few months of flowering where you're going to see those flowers develop. And then we'll come back and talk more about harvesting. We'll talk about curing and drying. But just remember, ladybugs are your friend. Ladybugs are the biggest friend to the garden. So if you can introduce some ladybugs into your garden, they will eat the bad insects. Another thing to remember is companion planting. So you can plant other plants near your cannabis that can help do things like put nitrogen in the soil. Beans, for example, will feed the soil with nitrogen. Marigolds, really pretty flowers, are also good for pest control because they will attract the pests that might otherwise be on the cannabis. So you might want to look at something we call IPM, which is integrated pest management. And that's going to teach you all about which bugs are good for the plants and which plants you can use in order to keep your cannabis healthy and happy.
Oh, it's exciting. I love talking about this stuff. So, unfortunately, we have to wrap this up. And with that, we wrap up another exciting, enlightening episode of The Truth About the Plant. Whether you're just dipping your toes in the world of weed or you're a seasoned connoisseur, remember, tread lightly, explore mindfully, and always stay curious. If you got burning questions or epic tales from your own grow journey, we are all ears. Drop us a line at info@mypersonalplants.com. Share your highs, your lows, everything in between. We love fan mail. And hey, if you enjoyed the show and you want more green goodness in your life, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, ring the notification bell like it's harvest time. Until next time, stay lifted, stay green, and keep those questions sparking. Catch you on the high side.